Proven Not Perfect. This is Chantra Powell. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad that you're here today. We're going to have a really fun conversation. You know we always do, because I have a village of all-stars, and I'm just going to keep bringing them forward because I believe these stories are stories that should be told. I have heard from you, and I know from myself that every conversation that we have is one that takes the way that we think to a different, better, more advanced place, because we learn. Enjoy, Allison Disney.
Hey, Allison. Hey, Allison.
Good morning, Chandra.
Good morning. Is it sunny in the Midwest today, or what's going on?
It's a little overcast still. It's a little overcast. Spring in Chicago.
Yeah. Well, I guess I was there a week ago when you were in Florida.
Of course, two ships passing in the night.
Yeah, we did a house swap for real, right? By the way, I met someone at my kid's school the other day. I took him to football practice, and this guy actually literally was on House Swap. Do you remember that TV show?
Yes, that's amazing.
He was on House Swap, he and his wife. And yeah, he was just telling me about it. I thought that was insane, but yeah.
He lived to tell the tale.
He lived to tell the tale. He's still married, so I guess it's all good. But yeah, that's crazy. Now he's like a big time trainer here. He's an accomplished track star. But yeah, anyway, I digress. So today I'm here with Allison Disney, who I've known for a chunk of change here. Allison, you and I met in what I'm going to call one of the most insane seasons of my life, right? Where, who decides that, they're literally just going to wake up in the middle of the night, in the middle of going through a business transformation in their big girl job and say, now I want to layer in business school. And I know which one it is. It's one of the top ones, and I'm just going to apply and it's going to happen. And actually it all did. And man, some of those weekends, I just remember falling into the weekend like, what? Wow, crazy.
We do, right? We wake up in the middle of the night and say, let's go back to school as adults. This is a great idea.
So tell me, what was your journey there? Why did you decide to go back to school?
So I had been on the fee-for-service side for a really long time. So my background's in marketing and advertising, and I had worked at big creative advertising shops and have had a really good run at those, mainly in the Chicago area. And I had this idea that I might want to cross over onto client side at the time. And I had worked primarily in CPG, retail. Those were mostly the portfolios I was working on. And I thought for sure, I'd need an MBA if I wanted to make that leap. Quite frankly, I've been in the Chicago market for a really long time. We have such a luxury of having a few really great business schools right in our own backyard. Yeah, and I thought, there's no reason that I shouldn't be taking advantage of this great resource, that's just a few minutes away. So yeah, I initially decided to apply because I thought I might want to make a jump to client side or do something maybe in a slightly different capacity than what I was doing at the agency at the time. So
creative ad agency, right? So you were literally at one of the world's top and probably have represented some of the most recognizable brands in luxury and consumer as well.
Yeah. So I have kind of done the circuit of Chicago agencies. I started at Young and Rubicam back when it was Y&R Advertising in the early 2000s.
Wow.
And then
I forgot about Y&R.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. And then spent time at Energy BBDO, which is the Chicago affiliate of the BBDO Global Network. And then also spent some time at Leo Burnett and others, but I've spent the majority of my time at BBDO, mainly in their Chicago office, but then more recently spent some time in their London office as well for about a year and a half with my family, and then came back to Chicago and then, had another work-life pivot after that. But I had the chance to work on some fantastic brands. I mean, our Chicago office, I still say the Chicago office of BBDO.
I do too. I still claim everywhere that my feet have been, literally.
Right. It was a team. It's always a team effort. So that office was essentially founded on their relationship with the Wrigley business back in the early CPG days.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we were in the Wrigley building for decades and decades. And actually, Mars Wrigley is still a big global client of BBDO. But yeah, worked on all the CPG brands, some retail, beer and spirits, all those things. Had a really great professional journey, learned a lot. But when I was ready for a new challenge or felt like, I really want to level up and do something different within this structure or within, the experience that I had amassed.
So that's actually pretty exciting. All of the things that you've been able to accomplish in that space. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about how that translates to some of the exciting things that you're doing now. I'd love to back it up a little bit and ask, who's Allison Disney? Who are you? Start with the little girl who grew up in Michigan and who was inspired. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that, because I don't think we get grounded in just who people are enough.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I had a pretty lucky and remarkable journey as a child in some regards, and in other regards, there feels like there's nothing remarkable about my childhood. But
you are so real, girl. This is why I loved you from the jump.
I mean, we don't all have, a tale of woe, but I was born in Seoul, Korea, actually. And I was adopted. I was one of those early 80s kids that was kind of on the wave of international adoption coming out of Korea. I was adopted by a lovely couple, Barb and Jerry Valensky, in Southwest Michigan. And that's where I spent the majority of my childhood, really.
How diverse was Southwest Michigan? I just have to ask you that. How diverse was Southwest Michigan?
Not at all. I mean, I have to give my parents credit. So they're Caucasian. So there is, they were always very transparent and really good about educating myself and our family and, our friends about the adoption process. But there's no hiding it, right? From the moment that they adopted me, it was like this thing that we, just had to confront. And my mother always likes to make the joke, everyone has sort of their delivery story. And she was like, I picked you up at the Detroit airport. It was very painless. And the rest is history, So I was 6 months old when I was adopted. I was also very lucky. My parents went through an adoption agency and a very, well credentialed adoption agency. It's still in practice. So I came with a fair amount of family history by, adoption standards at the time. So there wasn't any great mystery about why I was put up for adoption or anything like that. But yeah, I grew up in Plainwell, Michigan. It is the tiny one stoplight town in the Midwest,
Wow.
Between Kalamazoo and Grand Rapids. I have to say I was actually one of 3 families that were actually 4. 2 were about my same age and 1 was a little bit older. We were all Korean adoptees, actually. So
in the same community?
In the same community. It was pretty common in the 80s, I think, right around our generation, or it was becoming more common, I should say.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so there were 4 of us, but there was the 4 of us. I mean, we were it. I think we had, maybe 1 or 2 Hispanic families and 1 Black family. I remember that came through, our school, because I went to school from kindergarten to high school with the same group of kids, my entire life, small town public school system. And we were all the tokens. I mean, I would say, and even though there were 4 adoptees, we were in the same grade. We were certainly friendly, but it's not like we had some sort of adoptee sub community, where we were working out our any familial issues. I mean, I think when you're a kid, you're just kind of a kid, you're less aware of your surroundings or the things that might make you different to other people, from an external perception perspective. You're just living your life, trying to get through middle school and high school like everybody else.
And that ain't no joke, right? Getting through is just no joke. I mean, seriously, it's so funny because probably even there was a natural proclivity to maybe not be the four of us, right? Because
yes, absolutely.
I've definitely been in that situation, right? Where you feel like, creating this clump in the mini, it just feels wrong too, right? But what, so funny, fast forward to the future, you realize that if you would have created the clump in the mini, all of you probably would have been stronger and better served in the mini, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we were all going through our own independent experience. And, I grew up not realizing it was both a good and a bad thing, I think. And I'm glad that I can kind of appreciate it now, but you sort of grow up not realizing what it's like to grow up without anyone that looks like you. And I know that sounds really superficial, but like you just get used to being the only one, or the one that, looks a little different or does something a little different. And not necessarily in a special way. It's just different. I think it did help me as I grew up, because I did always feel like no matter what I do, it's going to be memorable, good or for bad, because I stood out, in the crowd just based on my surroundings. Now, as I got older, obviously that wasn't always the case, but growing up, I realized I was like, I had a real false sense of like specialness probably. But, then you finally, I have to also credit my parents. My father was an public school teacher. My mother was an executive assistant at a university. Education was always really important to us, but travel was really important too. And they always managed to find ways for us to travel internationally, even, when I was very young. And then I would realize like, oh, I can go to other places where everyone looks different or more people look like me. And that was a really weird experience to be in a place where you're like, oh, now I just blend in. Like that's not, something you realize that's happening to you until you have the converse situation. So I don't think I was really that aware of any of those things growing up. Like I said, my parents were super transparent, very supportive. And I think I've always had this sense that, regardless of the circumstances of my adoption, a lot of events and a lot of decisions had to get made for me to end up where I am today, and to live the life that I'm living. And while it feels like there's a little bit of luck or randomness to that, I think that's true for everyone, regardless of what your childhood was like. It's based on, your life is based on a series of decisions made by other people in the beginning and then by you. And that's just the journey,
And it's what you do.
But I certainly feel lucky. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, I know that your parents believe that they were the lucky ones. Beautiful, beautiful family that I had the pleasure of meeting. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Where did you go to college?
I went to Michigan State University for undergrad, started as a journalism major, and then ended up taking an advertising course through the communications curriculum and was like, hey, wait a second, maybe this is more for me. So yeah, I would think I was minoring in international relations. I had big plans to be like some sort of news desk journalist. And then I crossed over to the dark side of advertising. And I was like, wait a second, this seems more fun. This is more of the creative arts in it than journalism had for me initially.
So you have to answer this for us. So advertising, it is considered the dark side in some ways, right? Even when you look at, former TV shows like Mad Men and all that stuff, right? What is it about advertising that people consider the dark side? Is it this rooting historically in being able to convince people that they need stuff that they may not need? Is it a little bit of the trickery that's believed to go with that? Like, what is it that makes it, the dark side? And then the other thing is, talk about how in the creative space, how some of the things that are unorthodox in a different corporate setting kind of happen, right? Like I will never forget going into, advertising agent's office, and even in, early 2000s, alcohol was available and present.
Sure. Let me just spill all the tea. Let's see. I think you hit the nail on the head why we jokingly, refer to advertising as the dark side. I think as consumers and as people, no one likes to feel like they can be manipulated. Everyone thinks that they have their own free will and they make their own informed choices and that we're in control of, all of our own behaviors. But what you'll find in the agency world, or really in any marketing setting, I mean, I wouldn't say this is unique to agencies, but I think one of the values agencies bring is you find more sociologists, psychologists, folks on the strategic side that are saying, and for good or for bad, right? There's a lot of products and services out there that help people live a better life, but sometimes you need a little reminder or a little education about, why this is going to be helpful to you. And those sort of strategic planners are in charge of really understanding people and their behaviors and what motivates people so that we can help drive, behavior in a certain way. But it's also not perfect science. There's certainly also an art to it. And it can be a really colorful environment because you do get this mix of like strategists and data scientists and, technical folks, but you also need to create a space for people to have really big ideas. And you've got artists and art directors and copywriters and producers and all kinds of different crafts people to create these messages, that make us feel something. So in order to do that, you got to give people room to have a creative space. And sometimes that means, not set business hours, all kinds of different outings or things that you need to find your creative place. But yeah, I think, as people, like, we don't like to think that we're being manipulated, but the unfortunate truth is, or actually, I would say I actually find this to be quite a inspiring notion that I come back to a lot is we are more alike than we are different. So coming full circle from our earlier conversation, I think we're also, raising a generation, and many of us grew up in a generation where we're all taught that, we are special and we are all unique. But if you look at the data, and if you look at us on paper, and of course that never tells the whole story or the richest story, but like we are more alike as people and as populations than we'd probably like to believe. And we have much more shared interest and circumstance, I think, than most people can appreciate. So, it's a good thing to remember.
Yeah, no, it is. I think that's right. I think it's in particular a good statement right now where there's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of talk about things that pull us apart. I think, yours is a message of coming together. And I think that's right there. At the end of the day, no matter what the differences may be, externally or otherwise, there's a lot that we share. So that's really cool. All right. So now I got to fast forward. So now you've lived in London. You mentioned that pivot earlier. Tell me a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about that pivot and what do you think was the catalyst for the pivot? And then where did it land you?
Sure. Well, so I finished grad school, and, one thing you learn about grad school, maybe particularly at Kellogg, is you leave feeling so energized, so inspired to take on the world. You're ready for anything that the universe is going to throw at you. And in fact, you kind of seek out, I feel like, a big life change in some way. You feel like you've achieved this thing. It must have been for a reason, right? So I actually ended up not going client side post undergrad. I stayed with the agency I was with and had the opportunity to move to their London office. And it was a similar size position, but, it was in a new environment on new brands and new businesses. And it seemed like the kind of challenge that I was up for at the time. And I think I got there thinking that, okay, this was the itch that I had to scratch from an entrepreneurial perspective, right? Like, I'm just going to take myself completely out of my comfortable surroundings and go drop myself in another country with a whole new team and, new clients and surroundings and just, figure it out. And I think a little bit to my disappointment, I realized, wait a second, no, there are things that are different, but there are things that are the same, right? And am I being challenged in the way that I really wanted to? I think intellectually and from a professional perspective, it wasn't quite the challenge I was looking for. I'd certainly changed enough about my surroundings that personally, there were challenges. I also, I'm married. I had a 1-year-old at the time, 2-year-old at the time. No, one.
She was one.
She was one.
You were the baby.
Yeah. I had just finished my maternity leave and I was like, I'm just going to change everything.
I remember.
And
mainly because I resembled those decisions.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I just think you're so high on life, coming out of grad school and you have this new lease on, what's possible. And that's a great outcome from that experience. But you were also there for the pivot, Chandra. I know I called you from London at one point and I was just like, I don't think this is it. Like, I've moved my whole family here. I've done all these things. Like, we just, literally sold our home in the US, sold our car, all of our worldly belongings. Now I'm in London. London was amazing. Europe was fantastic to be living in at the time. But I was like, did I make all these changes, like searching for something and I wasn't going to find it in the job, that I had.
Oh my God. That's a soundbite. Did I make all these changes searching for something?
Yeah.
Ooh,
well,
I just got chills.
Well, I did, I was looking for that next challenge and it wasn't the one that was going to be fulfilling. So luckily, my husband became a bit of a catalyst. So he is a plant biologist and botanist by trade. We met at Michigan State as well. And he had the opportunity to, and he's also a wildcat, and he had the opportunity while we were in London. He was doing full-time childcare for the year and a half we were there. So I don't know if it was the full-time childcare or if it would be a true itch to get back into the professional world, but spontaneously he had an opportunity to work in an outdoor cultivation in cannabis back in the Midwest. And he said, this cannabis is, legalizing. It is, there are major changes happening. This feels like a once in a lifetime opportunity. What are the odds that you'll agree to move back to the US after, a massive international move? But, I think because I wasn't, fully settled professionally, in the UK, and the timing just seemed right. So we did.
Isn't that crazy how that is though? I'm going to tell you this, when you are truly married to your soulmate and best friend and partner, the symbiotic nature of how things flow, mind blowing. How many times have you probably talked to, a younger person who isn't married, wants to get married, wants a career, and they have all these questions for you about, well, how do we both have careers and blah, blah, blah. And I tell you what, whether it's my story, whether it's your story or other story, there is a symbiotic dance almost that happens. Oh, wow.
Absolutely. And listen, I think when you're young and you get married or you're thinking about it, you always think, or you hear these things about it being 50-50 and all of that. And the truth is, it's never perfectly 50-50.
Never.
A household's never perfectly in balance. I think balance is a word that, has been ingrained into us. It sets a lot of false expectations, but what you hope for is that you find someone that is supportive of you and that you are motivated to support equally, because there are times when they will need more and there are times when you will need more. And you hope that, you're just there to work it out together, and that you're a team. I mean, that you're a team. That sounds so cliche, but we talk about all the time. We're always like Team Disney, Team Disney first.
Yes.
And you really gotta, it really does take a team effort, and you gotta be able
and
to
that's the hard part,
but
that's
also
the hard
be
part,
supportive.
right?
Yeah.
Staying team and staying in that symbiotic flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think people have this false perception that it's hard work because it's hard work. I think they miss that actually the stuff that shouldn't be hard. Shouldn't be hard.
And listen, I know not everyone's lucky enough to find that so easily, but it also comes down, for me, it comes down to trust, right? Like if you know that person has your back and they're working towards the same outcome, Team Disney, right? Like my husband knows that at the end of the day, I want what's best for all of us and for our family. Like once you kind of have that as the foundation, then you sort of know like this person's always coming from the right place. So even if you don't agree with what's being said at the moment, or, the solution in the moment, you know that it came from the right place. So you don't hold on to any of those negative feelings if you didn't trust that person, or their motivation. So it's, yeah, you just have to,
especially not after a good walk away.
Yeah. I am so grateful every day that I am not doing this alone. Whether it's parenthood or my professional journey or my personal journey, we talk about it all the time. And we say like, we're so lucky we have each other to do this together, because we all need support, and nobody knows you like the person that you live with every day.
Girl, right?
All
right. So now cannabis has brought you guys back. Mm-hmm. You're back in the US. Now this baby girl is continuing to grow and she's so beautiful, seriously.
Thank you.
And you now are gonna go back to where you were, or you're being pulled still to do something different?
Yeah, well, I mean, both. So I did go back to where I was. I went back to the Chicago office of BBDO. They were very kind to find a position for me. And I did that for probably about 6 months, and then realized, I have capacity to do more than what I was doing at the time. And we just moved our whole family back to the US. So I looked at my husband. I was like, well, what's your branding and marketing doing? It better be good. Like, it better be sustainable. Like, what did we do? And actually, to BBDO's credit as well, they were very supportive of employee side hustles at the time. And there's a moratorium at the Omnicom network currently, and many companies, many international and national companies, in terms of working with cannabis or businesses in the cannabis industry. So I approached them openly and was like, hey, I'd like to do some contract work for my husband's company to help them with their marketing and advertising. Won't be on company time. It'll be a night and weekend sort of thing. And they were very supportive of it. So there's no conflict, and how you spend your time outside of work is up to you. So I was working at BBDO full time as SVP, client service director. And then I was working on the side as sort of an interim marketing lead at my husband's company. Did that for about 8 months as a contractor. And then I think it was Christmas break. We had a week off from everything. And I slowed down for that week and realized, oh, I've been working my ass off and I am tired. I was like, I am tired. Why did I decide to have 2 full-time jobs and have a now 2.5-year-old? I'm like, that seemed like a silly decision. But so I
decided, I resemble it.
Yeah, right. I know. I mean, you have that, when you have that drive, it's hard to say no to things. But so I decided I had to make a choice. BBDO was very kind. They had just offered me a new global position. It was very exciting, but I realized that what I was really enjoying doing was the more entrepreneurial piece in cannabis. And I had learned so much about it over those 8 months. I just saw so much opportunity there. And I decided to join with a handful of other contractors I was working with at the time and formalize our agency offering. Wow. So still in the agency world, but decided to create a fee-for-service offering specifically for the cannabis industry, doing all the things that we do and have done as a creative and strategic marketing company, but focused on helping the entrepreneurs in cannabis. So that was in January 2020 when I decided to leave my big cushy corporate job and join a startup.
I love
it. 3 months before a pandemic. I think I would have made the same decision if I knew what was coming, but maybe not. But I'm happy with it either way.
I tell you, look, it's crazy, right? You jumped because you felt like it was the right thing to do. And to your point, maybe if it would have been a little bit after, maybe you wouldn't have, which I believe is why it happened when it did, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. That's so cool. So cannabis, I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but give us like a little bit of an education around who your clients are in the cannabis space, what's hot and happening in the cannabis space. How should we all feel about it? And even the legalization that's happening as parents, right? You know, everything is changing, right? And there's no script for parenting. And I think that, you know, a lot of people that I talk to are sort of wondering, how should I feel about all the things that are happening, right? So would love your quick tour of duty around some of that.
Sure. Well, let's see. I could talk about this for another hour, but I will try and hit the highlights. I mean, so the cannabis plant is just a plant. It is a plant. If it is more than 3% THC, it's considered cannabis or marijuana. If it's less than 3%, it's called CBD or hemp. Or hemp, and can be processed into CBD, but it's all the same. It's just a plant that grows in the ground, right? That is illegal.
But that's a really good point that I don't think a lot of people know. Less than 3%, more than 3%.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
The same plant. It's just about potency. And that was written by a lawyer or a regulator somewhere so that they could have a definition, right?
Perfect.
And it stuck. So it's just a plant, and it's actually a plant that I believe can do a lot of positive things for people. And the reason that we thought that there was opportunity enough to build a business to serve this category is because it's more than just a pre-roll or a joint, right? So our idea of what cannabis and cannabis usage is from a pre-prohibition era. So imagine if all of your perspective on beer and spirits or alcohol, for example, was, or even pharmaceuticals, was all based on the experience and the level of knowledge and research and development of pre-prohibition of any of those categories.
Yes.
Right?
I love this conversation because this is exactly right. Because I even challenge myself, like I enjoy a glass of wine, right? But if I were it's okay to have a glass of wine, how would I feel?
Exactly. And the reason that we built a business to serve this industry is because it's so much more than just the packaged good. Now, we do work with a lot of what I would consider consumer packaged goods or manufacturers, right, who are making edibles and consumables and flower-based products, concentrates, all the different formats that are accessible now. There's a lot of companies that are really looking to innovate and bring cannabis into formats that look more mainstream. Like it's just, you know, once you can extract, you know, the active from the plant, you know, there's a myriad of applications for it, but it is more than just a consumer packaged goods side. It is also an entire retail sector that didn't exist before. It is also an entire B2B sector that didn't exist before. You know, my husband on the cultivation side, every day, you know, he would come home and say, we're modifying tomato plant, you know, wire today because no one makes anything specifically for the size and shape of a cannabis plant, right? So there is an entire economy that is being built on the growing, processing, tracking, production, sale of this plant. And it looks everything from, you know, early pharmaceuticals to technology to commercial agriculture to consumer packaged goods. So we also work with a lot of non-licensed, non-regulated companies, non-plant touching companies. We have a client who works in fintech and is creating a cashless payments program and really has ambitions to become, you know, a serious financial institution beyond cannabis. But cannabis has created the opportunity to quick start their growth, you know, from a product development perspective, meaning technical product development perspective. So there is an entire economy that this plant is creating that not only will help people in terms of health benefits and the applications of it as consumers, but also that is going to help the US economy. And I think that's why coming out of the pandemic, you've seen an acceleration of legalization at the state level, because it generates massive tax revenue in states coming in a country coming out of a recession, right? It also creates many jobs in everything from a, you know, retail perspective all the way through to R&D and to compliance and state jobs and a number of other job sectors. So it is, people liken it to the tech bubble sometimes. And I think that that's a little bit of a funny analogy, but in terms of the newness of this category and how quickly it's scaling and growing and its impact on day-to-day life, I think you will see cannabis permeate, many parts of our daily life.
So can I just double click on something that you said, because I think for those of us that are learning, if we double click on the fact that there was a time where pre-prohibition alcohol, and now it opened up, and then unfortunately sometimes it fell in the hands of our youth and they made poor decisions, right? And so we had to be very prudent, I would imagine at that time as parents, to start to create the messaging to go along with safety, age appropriateness, and things like that. As cannabis as an industry is growing and growing quickly. I mean, even just yesterday, I think I texted you a picture of an image where, my weekly newspaper in my area was featuring a farm not too far away in LaBelle, Florida. And, and talking about the industry, just as you say. And actually, I think Florida has become pretty quick to have regulation and standards around all of it, right? And so my question is, how do we think about that in the context of youth and, industry growing, but thinking about their understanding of it, application of it, all the things, right? Just as you would have done alcohol back in the day. Is there anything that we can read and learn from, or no, it's just kind of, we're figuring it out?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, listen, there's a lot of resources out there in terms of the science. There is more that is growing. I would certainly look to publications and journals coming out of, legalized states where doing that sort of R&D and monitoring is important to make that economy run. But I think you already said it, Chandra. I mean, cannabis is a bit like tobacco or beer or spirits or even pharmaceuticals, in that, it can be treated as and used as a vice for many. I will tell you the difference between cannabis and everything else that I just mentioned is it won't kill anyone. So and that has been proven over time. I mean, there is some clinical journals and things out there about the effects. And listen,
in fact, it's used for health treatment, isn't it?
In fact, it's used for health treatment, and it doesn't have to be smoked. It doesn't exclusively need to be consumed in a particular way. And, there are
ointments and oils and creams.
Yeah. And I go back and forth on this a lot, because on the one hand, as someone who's in the early stages of this industry, I feel like we have a responsibility as advisors and producers and manufacturers to create things that would meet a federal regulation if there was one, right? So listen, there is plenty of federal rules out there for consuming things that are non-cannabis, right? So why you would make something for people to eat that doesn't meet an FDA standard or a USDA standard, confuses me. Like, also as a business person, like, make something that will be sustainable,
Yes.
you won't have to completely reformulate if and when federal legalization does happen. But on the flip side, I always advise, particularly our CPG clients, look at the most innovative technology when it comes to child safety packaging, and make sure that your disclaimers and things are, infallible, or as much as they can be, because you want to be a good citizen in this industry, right? And set a good example. But at the same time, as a mom and as a user and as a human, like, there aren't child safety lids on the 6-pack of beer in my fridge, or on the many bottles of wine and booze in my liquor cabinet, and there aren't child safety locks on that pack of cigarettes you can buy at the gas station. And guess what? If my child accidentally, God forbid, or even, as she gets older, has a bad experience with a bottle of wine or a handle of liquor or a 6-pack of beer, there could be some serious health risks in the immediate term, if someone has an accident. If someone has that same experience with cannabis, they're going to have kind of a bad day, but no one's going to die, because of it. Like, so there is a stigma that I feel like
there is a stigma. Yeah.
There is a stigma that's been carried over from a lot of communications around it in the past. And a lot of people's lives and livelihoods have been ruined because of this plant. But I think we also have to keep that context in mind, right? Like, whenever regulations or things are prohibited, by a federal government, there's usually a lot of context and circumstance to why those laws are put into place. And you like to think that they're always about health and safety, but sometimes they're not,
it's about, it can be about money. It can be about control. In
fact, it usually is. Right?
Yeah. And even, seriously, as we double click, even as you think about the move toward regulation and opening up and legalization, how much of that is overnight? You go from prohibition to, like you said, it's now legal. Well, what changed, right? Now, I do feel that there's been such a move of study, the science, medically speaking, that I think that that's helped to change the stigma, and that there are real pain management opportunities with CBDA, that people who have suffered for a very long time are finding relief with creams and otherwise, or even just an ingestible. And I think that allows it to sort of walk its way to more of a mainstream. But yeah, if we could keep going forever and ever on this. I want us to have more of a conversation, but I kind of felt before we could even go there, we needed to lay a foundation of, first of all, who you are and you're seeing. And I love how you are owning your participation in this space as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. You're owning it, right? And that's huge. And you're very much trailblazing in a lot of ways. Pun intended there.
Well done.
And I think that, hey, where do I land on this? I'm sort of in the middle right now, because I see both sides, right? I see both sides. So, I feel like we need to keep talking, because I think these conversations beget more conversations, and it allows us all to become more educated and informed. And at the end of the day, being educated and informed, you can walk in what is your own truth. And to me, that is where you find peace.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself.
I love you, girl.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for being here. And thank you for being the beautiful friend that you are. Before we go, tell me your definition of the word courage.
I think courage is having the willingness to do what's right, even when it's not popular. It's that thing that, our parents have always told us, right? It's the same thing as being a high integrity person. Do the right thing, help people when they need help, whether it's the popular thing or not, whether it's easy. Usually it's doing the right thing isn't always the easiest thing to do, but you have to try. So I think that's what courage means.
Allison Disney, you are on your way to standing in your integrity and doing what is the right thing according to your truth, even when it's not popular. Although this is pretty popular. All right. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you, Chandra.
Thank you.